Okay, let's keep it going. Our next speaker, entering into the next talk, is focused on protecting product integrity and strengthening contamination detection strategies. Please welcome Head of X-ray Reclaim at Mettler Toledo, Mr. J.P. Perreault.
I like the walk-on music. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for your attention today. I want to talk about an important topic that affects most of us today in food processing. So today, just a little bit of background, first of all, on myself. So I've been in the food industry for a very long time, not total 20 years, but 35 years, really right from day one. 20 years supporting food manufacturing and food processors in automation, X-ray inspection, and other food safety technologies. Today, I lead X-ray Reclaim, which is North America's specialized foreign material reinspection services, essentially responding to foreign material incidents that occur in your facility, and essentially providing inspection and remediation services and reporting services to assist you in the return of those finished goods safely back to supply chain. I've experienced over 400 foreign material incidents. I'm sure, hopefully, that's a record, and not anybody else here has had that many under their belt. And we specialize in foreign material response, but specifically Mettler Toledo as an organization is a global leader inside of X-ray innovation. So we have been in that position for a long time, investing heavily in that position in terms of innovation in X-ray technology focused in foreign material detection. So starting off today, I'm going to touch on a couple things here. So this is the areas that we're going to be discussing, and I'm addressing with you to give you a sense of what we'll be reviewing. So really want to focus on an area that I haven't talked about before. It's really what the true cost of foreign material incidents is inside of food processing. So there's a financial exposure well beyond the loss of the finished goods. There's a supply chain interruption at hand, but there's other implications in terms of the distraction that it poses for operations and staff having to turn their attention to dealing with foreign material incidents in their facilities. So it's more than just the cost of the finished goods that are on the line and the reprocessing potentially, but the effort that goes into it, and then basically a lot of other factors that ultimately build on the cost of this exposure. The detection technology itself, I mentioned that I've got over 2 decades of experience inside of X-ray technology. Because of your specific disciplines, you're multifaceted, obviously focused inside of food safety, but there are a lot of topics you need to be experts on. So detection technology, either metal detection or X-ray technology, is complex. And even though these may be devices that you have on your line, there are innovations and there's a lot of misconceptions or misunderstandings of how that technology actually works and its role inside of reinspection services. So dealing, again, focused on foreign material reinspection inside your facility. And of course, their detection capabilities. And then, of course, preparing for your response and the strategy inside of your foreign material deviation plans, understanding what your options are, and also I'll be touching on that. And today and now, the majority of the time, there's an impulse to begin efforts and collaborate internally to deal with foreign material and rework the product through rental of metal detectors or X-rays, understanding those implications and how to develop strategies around that given the options that you have today, which is different than it was 5-10 years ago. And then mitigation and basically in the reinspection, dealing with, if you choose to go with reinspection services, to reaching for outside service providers, which exist today, to assist you inside this process. So how do you pick one? What are they all about? And what are the deciding factors in terms of how you're supposed to evaluate a trusted partner in dealing with a very, very critical issue and an on-hold suspect foreign material finished goods issue. So first of all, I'll just start basically just displaying here, in terms of product recalls, I get this question a lot in terms of, even family, what do I do for a living, sort of thing. and must deal with a lot of product recalls. In fact, we don't deal with product recalls at all. Everybody knows that once suspect finished goods are out of your control, and there's cause for action. Product recalls can happen, but internally inside of an organization, those suspect form material issues that hopefully, in the majority of the time, you're capturing those or you're securing those finished goods before they ever reach supply chain or even into distribution. So proportionality here matters, but effectively, no one really knows, for every one recall, how many suspect form material issues exist inside your facility. There's surveys and there's information. Each one of you probably know exactly how many form material issues you deal with annually inside your facilities, the small ones, the big ones, all amounting essentially to an implication of having to deal with that in one way or another, whether it's a single pallet or 300, 400 pallets. So these internal disruptions, obviously, as I mentioned, affect your production, affect your focus from an operational level, from quality assurance, and certainly supply chain. So they're really something that we need to talk about, and that's really where my focus is going to be today, is how we deal with these internal issues. But first of all, the cost associated to suspect form material. So these finished goods that are sitting inside your warehouse or your supply chain that you've quarantined. What's a 1 to 7 day hold in terms of a factor? So $200,000, $300,000 or whatever dollar value. There's a multiplier there in terms of the actual cost to your organization. Now, of course, your focus is inside of food safety, but you're working with operations teams. Everybody's goal essentially is for the profitability or essentially to control these situations for the most positive outcome for your organizations. And of course, always minding your area, which is food safety. But there is a factor on a 1 to 7 day hold, and that multiplier goes up. With more hold time, so a multi-week hold, that could be up to 3 times the actual value of the inventory as a cost that would be calculated inside of your financial systems and your organizations. Those are actual real impacts, both hard costs and soft costs to your organizations. Once it escapes, essentially enters into a situation where you have those finished goods out of your control, that balloons, of course. So you're talking about 10 times the actual value of the finished goods, damage to the reputation, implications to your score with your service score with your food retailer that you're dealing with. The list goes on and on. It's fairly lengthy in terms of how the cost exposure really explodes once those finished goods are out of your control. So the focus, of course, is to deal with these suspect form material issues as quickly as possible in an internal way, before they're released or escape your control. So, inside of that option, in understanding, of course, and I'll give you some more examples here just quickly, of what a $500,000 hold can incur, which is essentially $2,500 to $10,000 a day. So every day that value, and you can take any value, and that increases daily what the cost is. So really the goal here, and what I'm trying to express, is that every day that passes, obviously the calls will come. There'll be pressure inside of your team and also, of course, operations to deal with this situation as quickly as possible in either reworking internally or reaching for other services or reprocessing those finished goods. But every day that passes, there is a cost to your organization. So a strategy is important. So these costs come from product disruption, inventory, carrying costs, supply chain impact I've mentioned, the labor of your efforts and resources to perform the investigations towards remediating the product, and of course, customer and commercial risk to the organization. So now let's start at the beginning. So now we have on-hold finished goods. So, essentially either through a visual inspection in your facility, which is routine failed validation of a metal detector or X-ray. Again, there's a number of drivers that effectively will lead you to reaching for your deviation plan on form material. So what are your options? Basically your finished goods are on hold. the first and simplest thing is essentially let's reprocess those finished goods. Now, industry by industry, and in the experience that we have inside of Mettler Toledo X-ray Reclaim, and we deal with food processors and beverage processors and ingredients processors throughout North America, every state, every province. And the experience that we have is, each segment, each market, each processor type. Ingredients companies are different than dairy companies. Snack companies are different than processed foods companies in terms of how easy is this to really deal with and the choices they have to make. So some companies may, based on the category that they're in, it may be simple for them to reprocess. There's a lower cost, so it's a quicker implication. And the thing to take away on this is the cost of the interruption to the supply chain far exceeds the value of the inventory. So this is an option food processors reach for quickly, have reached for historically. Because it's the simplest, it involves less risk, obviously. You're reprocessing the finished goods, or you're going to disposal. Sounds extreme, but billions of dollars annually are lost in terms of the disposal and reprocessing of finished goods that are affected by suspect foreign material. The next, and again, this has been a problem that's been with us for decades and decades, ever since food processing has been around pretty much in its more modern form in the last 40, 50 years, is let's deal with it internally. What's that look like? That usually means let's rent a metal detector, let's rent an X-ray. Going back into your production, breaking into a line, everything's scheduled. There really is very little capacity in most situations to actually reintroduce those finished goods back into line to work with the existing technology, which is traditionally metal detectors, to deal with the suspect foreign material issue that you have. But this is an option that a lot of food processors have historically reached for. That has some implications, and I'm going to compare what the pluses and minuses are for dealing with this internally on your own, effectively, or working with a newer new response service like Mettler Toledo X-ray Reclaim, as we've been doing for nearly a decade now. So this would be the third option, third-party service. And I compare this essentially to if you have a house fire. You may try to put that out very quickly, but the best course of action is to call 911. Deal with the professionals that can come and remediate or deal with the situation. So trying to save money or basically understanding what the options are outside of that is a course that really needs to be pursued. It is something that is a professional or a critical matter that in some evaluation you may decide to work with a third-party reinspection service. So I'm going to give you some insight to that process, comparing it both internally and externally. So first off, so what's a third-party reinspection service provider? So this is specialized, just like a fire department specialized in fighting fires, a third-party reinspection service provider for dealing with foreign material is a team of individuals that has processes, technology, methodology based in food safety with their key objectives to deliver independent and validated process for inspecting and ultimately the outcome being reporting and providing you the best possible information to make informed decisions on remediating those finished goods back to supply chain. So this is essentially, an elaborate process, but it's a professional team with methodologies that conform to food safety practices that have to have validated procedures, very similar to how you would in terms of your inline solutions, things that you're familiar with in terms of your documentation, but more elaborate, audit-ready and bulletproof, effectively. In terms of the report that you would receive. So this is what third-party reinspection service providers provide. So what are the fundamentals that they need to have? So advanced X-ray technology, obviously, if you have the option of dealing with a level, you're dealing with a foreign material issue, your first interest as food safety professionals is going to want to be talking about the capability of the technology that they're utilizing. Obviously, you have either a metal detector or an X-ray, it's gone below the CCP or it's failed. You want the big hitter now. You want the best possible technology and methodology deployed and applied against this situation. So they have to have advanced technology and a background in food safety. And with respect to Mettler Toledo and other organizations that are in the X-ray business, I would hope that they have that background. And of course, the ability to provide you the necessary documentation, talk your language, and basically provide you the necessary reporting that you need to make sound and safe decisions. So in comparing internal rework to third-party services, just going through quickly a couple categories as pluses or minuses and how you evaluate what your decision is going to be. Do we rent an X-ray? Do we try to figure this out on our own? First thing you have to understand is control inventory. That seems like a good idea to maintain those quarantine finished goods on your site rather than shipping them off-site. It's a valid response. So, that and the benefit, of course, in internally reworking yourself is those finished goods are going to stay at your site. Third-party reinspection services, there's options. So, you can either deploy that service mobily to your site, but you can also ship it off-site. So if you're shipping it off-site, of course, you're losing control of the inventory. Food safety expertise, there's no questioning your capabilities inside of food safety expertise in your organizations. Obviously, it's very profound. But in the expertise of dealing with these specific situations, a team that's rehearsed and understands this and deals with this every day with the backbone of food safety is the difference here in terms of internal versus a team on the third-party reinspection side. Validated detection capabilities, essentially, when you have a foreign material issue, you're moving from your day in, day out processes to this is new. And you may have 1, 2, or several a year, but it's not what you do every day. So understanding the procedures associated with that. So, if you have sound foreign material remediation plans, emergency action plans within your food safety program, then great. That varies from company to company. But certainly with third-party reinspection service providers, that's an established process. Production impact, as I mentioned earlier, breaking into your production lines, doing this internally, has implications. Working with the reinspection provider, the first thing they should be providing you is basically a solution that has limited or no impact to the ongoing operation that you have to fulfill every day. So it's an issue that you have 42 pallets on hold, but that's Tuesday. Wednesday comes, you still need to produce product. So, the impact of internal rework is resources, whether it's 1, 2, or a group of your team operational to QA, they're going to be focused on handling that reinspection process internally. So the third-party reinspection service providers that provide teams of people basically allow you to oversee that process as opposed to be involved in that process. So speed of deployment, in not every organization, food processor has spare X-rays and spare metal detectors to pull out in terms of dealing with reinspection events. So that involves getting online and reaching out to possible trusted X-ray metal detector providers that can rent you those devices. That takes time. Not only time to identify options, but the right technology, and you're kind of entering an area of risk of, you're going to rent an X-ray, and I'll get into this in a second, but what generation X-ray? What's its capabilities? That has there's not only time associated to that, but there's time associated to deployment of that system, and that can take 3, 4, 5, 6 days, and every day that passes counts on hold suspect foreign material issues, with what I mentioned earlier. Documentation and traceability, out of the box. Obviously, third-party reinspection service providers. We've seen internal efforts where people have, of course, we do as well, provide rental on metal detectors and X-rays. They're used for a variety of reasons. But the process is that when we've seen our clients try to produce or execute these reinspection processes themselves, it's a fairly quick and not very profound documentation process. Essentially, they're looking for a bolt, and if there's no full traceability package associated to the inspection, whether it's a stainless steel shaving or a fraction of gasket. As soon as generally the group and the team is satisfied, that's really what you're heading towards as a goal, as opposed to, hey, we really need a profound report here that's audit ready associated to this process. Scalability, these situations can grow quickly from 20 pallets to maybe we should be expanding that process. And if you're tooling up for one, a third-party reinspection provider can deal with that because, again, capacity versus the fixed assets that you have. Direct cost is something we want to talk about. Of course, it's going to be less expensive initially for you to, and this is the driver. Let's do this ourselves. I've got a buddy. There's another company, a sister company that may have an X-ray metal detector that you can borrow or even rent it on your own. But there's scaling of costs here in terms of the internal process, and certainly working with a preset developed professional service has an initial expense associated to it. So comparatively, when you're looking at that, it's going to look more cost effective to do this internally versus using a third-party inspection provider. But days, again, matter, and the quality of those services matter, that have all cost implications that tend to mount in an exponential form here, but initially they look like they're lower. Project risks, obviously the risk of delay associated to doing this internally versus a dial 911. There's an associated risk doing this internally versus working with a reinspection provider that's sitting in the ready, waiting to deal with this. Liability exposure, I don't really need to talk about this too much. Obviously, if you're doing it internally, you're the processor, you're having to assume those risks. It's not part of what you do every day, so that can be a little bit concerning in terms of an organization asking its food safety teams and its operational teams to accept the liability in their professional capacities of dealing with foreign material reinspection efforts. Your job was finished, really, when you've identified their suspect foreign material and put it on hold. So getting involved in the rework process creates liability because it isn't something you do every day, versus a shared confidence, really, inside the documented third-party validation process working with a third-party reinspection service. And then, of course, business continuity on both sides. So summary internal rework looks like it's lower, doing it yourself, looks like it's lower direct costs, primary risk, resources, constraints, accuracy, the best fit, smaller incidents, available really for, limited expertise, so simpler form material issues. Third party, the primary advantage is lower operational risk, right? And faster execution. Higher service expenditure looks like initially, as we've touched on, but really, factoring in all the costs, a tremendous benefit and cost advantage. And then, of course, which foreign material incident really isn't complex. I mean, rarely do we see missing bolts. We see shavings and gaskets missing. These are all complex. So, working with a third-party reinspection service provider. So this is just a quick summary. So just for the sake of time, just going to keep moving through here quickly. So in looking at third-party reinspection service provider, these are the top 5 things to consider. Of course, to provide food safety validation, defensibility, detection capability technology, which hopefully I'll touch on here quickly. The inventory option service that they provide. So reinspection services can either be mobile, delivered totally to your site, where you're deploying X-ray and inspection team and methodologies directly to your facility, as we do at Mettler Toledo Recovery. But the option also exists to ship your finished goods offsite. So those are 2 options, essentially shipping your finished goods offsite for external rework. The evaluation process basically is weighted, based on who you are inside your organization. Food safety validation, in terms of evaluating third-party reinspection providers, how good are they at food safety validation? Detection capability and technology, the technology they're using, the operational execution and throughput, the speed at which they recover, and the total economic impact of dealing with this. Because it's a different cost to bring reinspection services to you. Obviously, you're not shipping those 3 or 4 or 5 trailers off-site for reinspection, and that has a big implication. That can amount to $60 to $1 per case, greatly adding to the cost and the delay. We offer both, so we're pretty firmly aware of the cost implications on both sides. So choosing which one, either ship finished goods off-site or at your facility, so mobile. So the decision-making tree here is essentially the drivers would be, the cost of transport. So which one's better at cost of transport? Well, obviously, if you're deploying services directly to your site to deal with your suspect foreign patrol issues, you're not having to ship your finished goods off-site. So that's a check mark inside of saving cost of transport. Very, very limited in terms of deploying an X-ray and a team to your facility versus shipping 4 or 5 tractor trailer loads of finished goods one way and then back. Faster recovery time, whether you recognize that or not, inside of services where you're shipping your finished goods, we're dealing with single facilities and regions. We have that implication as well. We offer reinspection services in-house. You're getting in queue, you're getting in line. There's only so many reinspection lines that are available to you. Whereas if you're reaching for mobile services delivered directly to your site to deal with your foreign patrol issues, you're a unique customer. You're deploying X-rays and an inventory of X-rays and teams available to you. So less of a capacity restraint. So there's a faster recovery time associated to that. Chain of custody, obviously this is a clear one. If you're shipping finished goods off-site, you're losing chain of custody. So in the one that kind of, whether it's minimal or whether it's beneficial or not, it's kind of both at same facility. Operations that don't have their own warehousing on space. This one is off-site. So if you have limited space or you don't have warehousing, then it is good to work with off-site services. Refrigerated frozen products, those can be handled in both locations. So these are some of the considerations I'm trying to highlight for you. High value inventory usually links to the amount of product that you have. And that can be expensive to ship off-site when you're doing full cost accounting and doing these things. And small volumes involving 300-400 cases, it's most likely better to ship those to an inspection center to have those inspected and reported on for your suspect foreign material issues. So talking about the technology here and wrapping up as quickly as I can with the time I have left. Everybody's familiar with metal detectors. They have a role, obviously, in your inline food safety foreign material inspection. They also have a role in dealing with reinspection of foreign material issues, albeit limited. Obviously, ferrous, non-ferrous, stainless steel, aluminum. There's only a part of the category of foreign materials that we deal with every day. Even those are CCPs. The events can happen for a variety of other types of foreign materials that metal detectors can't, and we all know, I trust, metal detectors have a set capability in determining or detecting those types of foreign materials. Oops. So inside of the X-ray inspection, so metal detectors being one, X-ray inspection is one thing I wanted to talk to you about, and using that technology, because it's often thought of, we have a foreign material issue in our facility, we need to run an X-ray, or if you're going to plan on trying to do something internally, by yourself. So the first thing that needs to be understood is, what are you getting, or even if you're thinking about using a third-party reinspection service provider, having a deep or some level of knowledge about the type of X-ray that you're using and what is that technology and what's the quickest way for you to understand. I think I've given it to you here. It's really about the detector type, but there are 3 generations of X-ray technology today, as we like to categorize them. The first 2 types reside in the detector type that is energy integrating detectors. This is fairly old technology. It's been around since the 90s. Today, with the advent of newer photon counting technology, it's not comparable in terms of its ability to detect foreign material, but it's still commercially available today and in use. And it doesn't matter the type of X-ray system, really what's under the hood in terms of the detector is really what we try to point out. So those are EID detectors that are brought to market since the 90s. And they exist in generation 1 and generation 2, and I'll break those two generations apart for you in a second. Photon counting detectors, which is from the medical imaging industry, have been with us now since 2020. Mettler Toledo, and the nice thing with our reinspection services using photon counting technology, we've gone on to implement a lot of this technology because it's given clients that have had foreign material issues in their facilities a demonstration in the reinspection process of exactly how powerful that technology is. So traditionally we see a third to 50% over a period of time of clients that have foreign material issues that use our service that go on to considering implementing this technology. So that's the third generation photon counting technology. So what's the difference between the three? First generation EID is essentially measuring on density. Okay, so that essentially is going to be better than a metal detector, but still with limitations. Because we know there's a lot of foreign materials out there that have low density, plastics and rubbers as an example, stones, other foreign materials that aren't traditionally known within your CCPs. So first generation detectors, single energy, able to detect on density. Second generation EID detectors, same, still EID, energy integrating detectors, which are somewhat inefficient in the way that we speak about them today compared to the newer technology. And enhancement, better than the first generation because now we're not only detecting on density, we're detecting on material composition. We're able to, with these types of detectors, remove the organic matter from the imaging, highlighting the foreign material. So now you're starting to approach being able to deal with low density foreign materials to some degree. Third generation technology, still in terms of splitting or removing organics, but now we're dealing with multi-spectrum analysis versus a differential of energy levels. And that's what dual energy gave you. So the precision enhancement is dramatic. It's a 480% factor improvement on the image that we're able to generate. That's the data that you're producing effectively when you scan a product across an X-ray beam and you're collecting that information. We're capturing 480 times more data in our data set. And that's how an X-ray works. You generate the X-ray image or capture the data effectively, and then you have to analyze that data using algorithms. So when you're starting with 480 times more information, it's a potent tool in terms of detecting foreign materials. And now we're able to, with this technology, which as I mentioned, has been deployed for several years, inside of a reinspection process, which we're using different algorithms, engineered algorithms and thresholds that you would never use in line using the same technology, but using that tool, we're able to get down to very, very small limits on stone, glass, plastics, and rubbers, whether they're in cases or small packages. So that's an effective tool. So understanding if you're going to be reaching for an X-ray and you've already been convinced that's a silver bullet, well, what war are you fighting? Because the type of bullet matters in terms of the X-ray technology. So trying to encourage you to ask what's under the hood when you're looking at either on an implementation side or dealing in more critical matters on the foreign material side in the type of technology you're utilizing. But ultimately, whether it's, hey, we're going to put an X-ray in, or we have a foreign material issue, trust no one. Ask questions and get testing. Inspection validation is the first step in terms of detection thresholds. Guarantees to 2 sigma. The methodology has to be there. So if you have an issue today you need help with, or if you're looking to implement on a long-term basis, understanding in a scientific way, quickly, if you've got a foreign material issue, the testing, the validate testing, the performance guarantee effectively that's being given to you in terms of what you can expect when this reinspection process happens. So photon counting matters, and to the degree that in the type of approach and technology, and as I mentioned, Mettler Toledo is an innovator in technology. We have for a long time have beam geometry, how we inspect packages, top, bottom up, side shooters, orbital shooters. Understanding the benefits, and there are slight benefits to each one of them in certain types of applications. The problem is, if we're not using a photon counting detector, and what we've come to understand is the detector pretty much solves a lot of this in terms of, because it's so, the amount of data we're getting, now geometry matters less as well. So that's just a point of education as well in terms of photon counting detector. So that's it. I thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry for having gone over time.
JP, thank you so much. Anyone's looking to get a hold of JP, I'm sure his contact information is there for any questions. Thank you again, and much appreciated. Thank you so much. Great job.